Background music is more than just music to be ignored by. Hi, my name's Jeff Price, and I'd like to welcome each of you to Intentional Musicianship, where we explore all things performance, whether it be performance practice, storytelling, showmanship, and audience engagement. And the first thing I like to say this week is that I really love performing background music. And today, we're going to take a fresh look at it, because if you're like me, you've heard yourself, your group, other musicians dismiss background music, background jobs as unimportant, insignificant, just not something that I feel like I can do. And if you've ever felt that way yourself, or if you want to be able to talk with your students and maybe challenge that way of thinking, I have a few tips. Because in reality, background music is just a different role we play as musicians, and it's an essential role. It's like in Disney, where everyone is a cast member and there's no deviation on if you're the superstar at the front of the stage or if you're the person that is cleaning up the park. You all have a role to play, and it's a big deal. If it wasn't a big deal, you wouldn't be employed playing this role at that important event. And I think these events that we're at, that's what makes us human. That's part of our culture and part of our society. And so let's talk about how we can sort of approach this with maybe a renewed purpose. And so maybe the next time you get an offer for a background role, background music gig, you can see it for what it really is. It's an opportunity to create something meaningful for everyone that is at that event. So when I start this off, I'm trying to think of the cultural significance of background music. And the way I think of it, if an event is truly important, we have music there in our society and our culture. It could be weddings, could be graduations, could be something ceremonial or in memorial. And I know in the Army, we had a saying, if an event had significance, an Army musician was there. It wasn't about the musician. It was about marking that moment and creating that memory for the people in attendance. In essence, it's not always about us as a solo musician. And what we have to realize is within that role as a cast member for that day, we're a significant memory maker, a moment maker. And I think of it in the Army, when a son or daughter went through basic training and they graduated, it was such an important event to mark this great important event in their life that we would send Army musicians, an Army band. During the course of their career, whether they were promoted or maybe they took over command or the responsibility was very large, maybe they would deploy, something ceremonial in nature, it was such a big deal that you'd send Army musicians and we would support it. If the community had a great event, an amazing way that maybe everyone can get together and share together as humans, as a society, in a community, they'd invite the Army band to play, us Army musicians. When we deploy and people were away from home, we'd like to say that, when we played for others, we would remind them who they were, where they're from, and what they're fighting for. And we didn't forget these people. That was us. When we were deployed. And for that moment in time, they were so significant that we would perform for them. We wouldn't leave them by themselves. And in the same way that if someone did fall in service to their country and give that last full measure of devotion, that memorial for that family, that Army musician was there to say goodbye and allow that family to have closure. So background music can be really significant in a lot of different ways. And so when I think of this background music and you think about all those things, we can think of the intentionality of its design, its shape, its purpose. It's not just filler. It can be carefully designed to shape emotions and add to the experience. I think the funniest thing is when you go back in history and we think about something that we all joke about, elevator music. And it started as a way to calm people in this new unfamiliar space. You're in a box and you're going up in a building, and people might have claustrophobia. You're surrounded by people you don't know. You're a little uneasy. And so we had a company that just sort of specialized on having this perfect setting of music just to relax people and just for that short period of time loop to calm them. And that's how we got this thing called Muzak, M-U-Z-A-K. And I know when we get to elevator music and you think of Muzak, people think of the light pop music, reframing things that we would hear on the radio in such a way, crafted in such a way. But you think about that in context of background music. Hey, this human-to-human connection is important. Muzak can connect with people in various ways, and it was designed to create the right atmosphere for the right timing and place from which it was played. You know, this thing went to buses, this went to train stations, this went into the airport, and it was designed in these times to maybe calm people's nerves. It wasn't meant in such and such a way to be a party. And when I think of that, when you go into things later on, we have a company now currently called Mood Media. And I remember doing some research on it, a few years ago. And I was fascinated by this company because they had bought out Muzak. And now they have an entire industry built around creating the perfect setting, not just musically for a hotel, a restaurant, a retail store, but, they're part of the whole concept of how to bring people in and enjoy their shopping experience and come back again and again and again. And what is played and how the speakers are set up sort of drive traffic and drive purchases. And so this music to be ignored by can be an incredibly powerful thing. It's funny. You can joke about maybe how we even talk about background music. And I don't know, maybe we could call it something different. Maybe we could call it sonic branding. Maybe we could call it environmental scoring or atmospheric performance. Maybe that's a way we can get around this background musician approach to the gig and maybe take it more seriously, because it's not junk. It actually has real purpose and real weight. And we all do it as musicians because it does add real value to an event. A great background musician, we don't just play when we get there. We read the room, we set the tone, we enhance the experience, and we embrace that role. We turn this passive job, this passive gig, into something intentional. And we've all seen those musicians that have taken this on and they've turned these background gigs into high-paying niche careers. And they brand themselves in so many different ways to make sure that people understand that they're setting the atmosphere and setting the mood. And maybe that's why when we're doing this and maybe talking to people about this, maybe it's just got a dirty term, a dirty connotation on our hand, and we have to maybe cleanse ourselves from that and understand that maybe some of these words matter in how we connect with others. One thing when we think about this background music and we're talking to our clients and our sponsors, and this could be in your group as a music educator or your career as a performer, maybe we ought to understand what our audience really wants. And that's why we're asking the audience, well, who is our audience and what do they want from us? And it's important when we're talking to these organizers to not think like we might in musical terms, but understand what they want and walk through with what I hear you saying that you want is this. Let me give you a sample of the music I'm thinking about to see if it fits what you would like. We need to figure out how to guide that conversation and not just accept what they're saying, because the language that they use might be different. Or if we do accept what they knew, we've got to understand what they really want, what kind of atmosphere they're trying to create. And that way we can frame our role, figure out what costume we have to wear, so to speak, with our music. And I think that's going to really help change how people utilize us and value us, and how we have customers coming back again and again and again. And the way I think of this is I've had different units like in San Antonio and in Alaska where we'd send out just 2 or 3 musicians out to a ball to play background music. Now, oftentimes, as opposed to it being called background music, this would be controversial. It was actually jazz music. And the jazz music was the connotation that the customer wanted, but it wasn't jazz. The customer wanted light, delightful music to set the tone and the atmosphere, something that people could talk over, things that people would like. And this was not jazz in parlance that a musician would talk about within our American jazz culture. They had taken the word and they had redefined it as this light, delightful background music. And so we would send a vocalist and a guitar, and they play off lead sheets, and they play popular music. They play Broadway music. Sometimes it would be true jazz music, but there would be things that would add to the atmosphere. Sometimes it could be patriotic in nature, things that would set the mood for the particular event. Sometimes we'd send a vocalist and a guitar player and a cajon player. Maybe we'd send just a vocalist, a cajon, and a bass. And the music itself was shaped by those performers very quickly into something very meaningful to add to the atmosphere and the importance, to create that moment and those memories for everyone. Because, people knew the music, it fit, it didn't distract, it augmented. I think of it, like those great masters like a Hans Zimmer or a John Williams when they're scoring for film. And in this case, with background music, we're scoring a live film. And without our critical thinking, our careful thought and planning, our execution in what we're doing, that event won't have the greatest meaning. In the same way, some of our classic films of all time would not be the same. So this background music that we will score for the event allows the person to really, get the most out of this. The community gets the most out of this. And, we're the host with the most. So background music, just remember, we can be intentional with it. It's powerful in its purpose in whatever role that we have. We're going to talk to our customers. And the next time you get that background job, that gig, you don't have to just play the music to be ignored. You can use that opportunity to set the scene, create the mood, own the role. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially I know all of you have had background jobs and musical gigs, and I know they probably turn out to be more important than expected, not only just for the customer, but for you and how they've impacted you. And so I'd invite you to reach out to us at intentionalmusicianship.com. I'm really thankful that you've chosen to join us today and for tuning in. And I hope you join us on the next episode of Intentional Musicianship.